My name's Ben Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of the Planning Commission. I have a couple of our other staff here, Rachel Hurt, Monica Ramsey, and Amy Scott. And then we have Christian Howard of the Chamber of Commerce here. The Chamber was a gracious partner in this, helped us organize all the interviews that you hopefully saw in the video, and just has been, I guess, just a good community partner for planning and zoning, involving us early in on process so we can help people out who they are helping. And to just get started, we were going to let Christian do a little introduction and narrative, I guess, of kind of where we're at as a community, some of the successes that we've seen over the past decade. So, Christian, why don't you go ahead?
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. And like Ben said, I do want to kind of go over to some of the past successes we've had in economic development over the last 10 years. Because really, over the last decade, Warren County has seen really amazing economic development success. Local companies have announced over 146 new job-creating projects in Warren County, which has resulted in over $4.1 billion of investment by these companies into their facilities and into our community. And so, which has led to the creation of over 8,900 jobs over the last 10 years. So it's no wonder with the success that we've really seen ourselves consistently ranked as one of the top performing organizations and one of the top performing communities in the country. Site Selection Magazine has ranked the Bowling Green metro area as the top 6 Tier 2 metros and metros under 200,000 people for 8 consecutive years, and we even earned a #1 ranking in 2018. The Chamber itself also won its first ever Matt Conway Award last year for our performance in 2020 as one of the top 20 economic development organizations for any community of any size in the country. So the Kentucky Transpark and the South Central Industrial Park, also known as the SCIP, have led the way in this success, accounting for over half of all the investment by companies over the past 10 years. As the course of this $2.2 billion worth of investment has generated over 4,200 jobs since 2011. This impressive growth has led each park really becoming a pillar of each of our local economies, with the SCIP generating over $15 billion in economic impact and supporting over 8,000 other jobs throughout the community. On the other side of the county, the Transpark, our newer industrial park, it supports about 4,500 jobs in and around Warren County and has an economic impact of over $7 billion. And so beyond this, our success isn't just really confined to each of our industrial parks. We've seen success all over the counties as well. But the Transpark has kind of been home to some of our largest announcements, both in jobs and investment. And that really kicked off in 2003 with Bowling Green Metal Forming. That's not really in the scope of this plan, but that's where it kicked off the Transpark, was they invested created 300 jobs as they started their facility. And this is really our largest job-creating project in terms of new companies coming in up until 2021 last year with Tyson Foods' announcement of the Transpark, where they were going to create 451 new jobs. And also the last several years has seen a string of successes that have really shattered records in terms of what we've seen by companies investing in their facilities. Starting with Ball investing $305 million in their facility in the Transpark. Then again, Tyson shattering that record with another $355 million worth of investment. So pretty successful over the last 10 years. I think we're planning on continuing to be successful over the next 10 years anyway.
Thank you. So from here, I don't really have anything specific planned other than just to go through. Of course, you see the economic development goal there: maintain a strong local economy that provides opportunities and resources to everyone in Warren County. Just go through each of the 10 objectives, and then point out some of the items that I found interesting as we go through each one of those through the interviews, and then I'll just stop and ask if there's any questions or comments. Now's the time to ask them, and we'll just get started. So there's the objective and the action items. So again, to pursue actions to strengthen core industries, retain existing businesses and industries in the community, and attract new businesses and industries, particularly those that will help diversify the local economy. With this interview, we did interview our chamber president, Ron Bunch. Some of the interesting items that I noted down here were that our targeted businesses are ones that have more than 50% of their business outside Warren County. So that's what they're targeting to recruit. The other thing was just zoning and land use for sufficient industrial and commercial. We are, as with the success that Christian just noted, we are constantly having to look for new industrial lands and new commercial lands. We constantly review the future land use map for areas for both business and industrial land uses. Talent, so people, that's the number one issue that going forward, trying to match that supply of talent for the demand of our current jobs. We'll talk more about workforce here in a little bit, but specifically talent and generating the type of talent that is needed for our community. Technology and innovation are our major focus going forward. We'll have some more on that here in just a second too. And then something that we've started to see more of is Nashville's influence on Bowling Green. I would say, 10, 20 years ago, we would hear that a lot in this community that Nashville had a major influence on Bowling Green, Warren County. But that wasn't so much the case back then. We'd have a few people that would, live in Warren County and work in Nashville, but it wasn't as much as everybody thought. Typically, anybody who lived in Warren County worked in Warren County, and it was less than 1% that actually worked outside of Warren County. That number is starting to creep up, especially with Amazon's probably got the most headlines in Nashville as they build the largest building, second largest building, square foot wise in the country, with their Amazon warehouse. But now Oracle, which is the second largest software company in the world, is now building their marketing, and I don't remember what all they're putting in it, but their headquarters in Nashville as well. And that's on top of the already crazy growth Nashville has. So we start to see more and more of that Tennessee influence and more people wanting to live here and drive an hour to work rather than maybe sit in traffic for an hour to go to work. So that's starting to become more prevalent. So with that, I'll just stop there and ask if there's any questions on this objective one. You see all the action items there. If there's any questions for me or Christian, we'll try to answer them, or just comments, just general comments you'd like us to consider. Not yet? You're gonna have to give me something before we leave. I'll go on to the second one, maybe. Okay. Pursue the development of corporate business parks to attract leading technology-based industries. For this, we spoke to Buddy Steen, who was the president of the WKU Research Foundation, is leading the new WKU Innovation Campus, and this has to do with technology-based business attraction. It's really resource collaboration and sharing for startups. Collaborative smart space was a neat term he used. It's not just sharing office space, but sharing resources and connecting resources for people who might need certain jobs done. And then just really creating some of that talent base and trying to attract those technology-based resources. So I mentioned Oracle earlier as a software company in Nashville. When a major player like that comes into a region, there are opportunities there to take advantage of maybe some of the spin-offs from a company like that. And then additionally, just research and design, those types of things, trying to connect that And then also incubators, like starting businesses and doing that. So there's really a huge push to I guess, expand those areas. The next part, just mentioned, I picked out flexible zoning for business park settings. We've tried to look at that and be more flexible on zoning in the past 5 years or so. But we've added some commercial uses into industrial zones to go in edges of industrial parks. Maybe like an extended stay hotel would be an example. Just some of those more intense commercial uses that won't negatively affect the business park or industrial park, but complement those. I can't think of a specific example of one yet. I know we've had an approval on one, but it's not been built yet. But we are trying to, again, make more of, well, Transpark, one thing I think it does really well is kind of that business park environment. It's not just industries. Obviously, that's the major core of it, but there's some of these auxiliary things around the outside as well. So, any questions, comments on any of the stuff and the second objective? All right, it's going to be a short night. So support local small businesses, entrepreneurial endeavors, and industries. So we talked to Sabina Lewis of Avant-Garde Wealth on this interview. And I think one of the things that we hear all the time but don't probably say or do enough, but is to support local shops, support local and shop small. So there are several incentives out there, promotions, I guess, to do that the community is working on and already does, and so we're looking to build on those. But one of the things that we talked about too was creating connections among small businesses. That was very important for her small business anyway, almost that social infrastructure. And I think that is tough in the planning realm and the government realm, is how to reach people now. There's so many different avenues for communication, social media, newspaper, YouTube, all these competing things, and we find that the public wants to consume that the way they want to consume it, when they want to consume it, and it's really hard to know how to serve all those things. So that's not unlike a small business, especially one that's an internet-only business, to figure out how to do that. Some other things we're worked on, live workspace and those collaborative spaces. So one thing we would like to continue to pursue is figuring out a good way to have a home, but have a business in your home where customers could come to that. So where might that be appropriate? Example might be a single person attorney's office or something like that, where you can have your clients come in. You may live in the back, or an artist studio out front, and you may live on the second floor or something like that. The other thing that is becoming more and more critical, and really is the new utilities, just broadband infrastructure and being able to have broadband. I think we've hopefully finally got on the right track with that locally. It's probably going to take a couple years, but 2, 3, 4 years, but hopefully we'll have broadband throughout all of Warren County within the next 3 years. Then we also need to address some of the inner parts of the city to improve that infrastructure as well, and I know there's some people working on that also. Entrepreneurial endeavors, just working on creating incubators and startup businesses. How do you take the Dell, Microsoft, Apple concept, somebody starting a business in their bathroom or in their garage, and being able to have the opportunity to grow that into an industry or a business, but also just simply supporting the small business owners and startups that never want to be that. They just want to maybe have their own mom and pop shop. So trying to figure out how to do a better job at that, creating more of those opportunities. Industry, workforce, and talent. We've talked a bit about that. We'll talk more. So again, I'll stop and ask if there's any questions here. Yeah.
You mentioned broadband. Is there any efforts or what's the plans for fiber optic?
Yeah, so fiber is essentially what I was referring to. The question was, what do I mean by broadband, and are we talking fiber optic? Yes. So there is a pilot, well, there was started with a pilot project between NCTC and WRACC co-op. It started kind of in that Boyce Alvaton area. It went really well, and now that has been expanded to much larger area. If I started trying to describe it, I'd get it wrong, but they've got a website now. Then that has now been expanded too with some of the grants, recent grants, government grants as well, and there are partners with whatever Spectrum calls themselves these days to do certain areas. And then there's also in the northern part of the county, like Smiths Grove area, they have part SCRTC, I think it is, or is it northern? I don't remember. The north, the south one, the south's the north ones, all I remember. But those, so that's pretty much along every part of the county, at least along kind of that I-65 corridor that has started expanding, and it is fiber, and it's fiber in the home. It's not a fiber node. So that is happening, and that is what I'm inviting. By the end of 3 years, they should have those contracts done. We'll see, delays always happen, but supply delays right now due to COVID and whatever else is going on in the world kind of tend to slow projects down, but building materials are one of the major things getting slowed down now. So, but hopefully, I won't say it will be perfect, but at least we'll have made a big dent in it, hopefully in a short amount of time, and that's going to be huge in expanding everything. Good opportunities. Okay. So 4 is to support the continuation and strength of high-value local agricultural sector and related economic opportunities. So I think we tried to get with our Ag Extension Office, but Joanna Coles is who we've been talking to, but the week I called her, I think she had COVID, the flu, and strep. So we didn't get a chance to hook up with her, but we're going to continue to talk with them. But just a couple things to point out: about a $200 million economic impact from less than 1% of the population in Warren County. So that's a big number. Agritourism, we have a large growth in the number of agritourism venues. Typically, we've seen that in the form of wineries, weddings, and kind of seasonal event things, Christmas, Halloween, those types of things. But we've seen a big growth there. Farmers markets, and I don't know too many roadside stands we have, but there are several out there. Kind of part of that farm-to-table movement, buy local, grow local, and all of that. And then kind of that movement towards urban, suburban agriculture. I guess when I was young, we just called it gardening, but it's having a big garden, growing vegetables, selling them at either the farmer's market or at a roadside stand. So there's a lot of growth there. The other thing I don't want to gloss over, I think, is just land use. We lose about 400 acres of farmland every year that's just rezoned for some type of development. And I think that's one of the toughest challenges that we have in our community is that kind of often competing interest of growth versus preserving farmland. And it's just a really difficult balance to achieve. And And, you know, I mean, we could probably talk about just that all night. So with that, I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions on this section.
Can you elaborate on the difficulty of the balancing act?
Sure. So as, you know, some of the items Christian mentioned, so when you bring in the number of jobs and the number of industries, our community ends up being a huge importer of human capital. So for every job created by one of those, typically there's 4 people that come with that job, and then those jobs then generate other service jobs to serve all of those people, so basic jobs, I guess. So when you have the amount of growth that we're having in this county, that competing interest becomes about where do you house all of these people, where do they work, where do they go, where do they drive, transportation, all that. So that's the balance versus preserving farmland specifically. Well, the best farmland is typically, you know, flat, rich soils is typically also the best industrial land because it's flat and easy to develop, which is also the best residential land. So you get that market forces competing, and then you got the land use challenge of preserving that farmland versus trying to place all of these different land uses. So that's kind of what I'm, on a very high level, what I'm talking about.
I guess I'm just confused even when the community doesn't want the land changed from agriculture to another type. It doesn't seem like there's a voice from the community that's ever heard.
So what I always say in these situations is for every voicing one side, there's always a voice on the other. So when you say the community doesn't want those changing, obviously there is one that does. So I think it's tough. I wish I had an answer for you. I don't. I think that's one thing that we need to really work on in this community is if we're going to have a line, where is that line? I think it's kind of gray a lot of times. I will say that typically the development follows sewer, and we've extended our sewer lines pretty far out in several different directions at this point, especially along Scottsville Road, really past Alvaton, and out Nashville Road, past Buchanan Park at this point. So I think that becomes even more enticing to developers, and it does make land costs go up. And then the other part of it is the land for sale? And maybe not while it's being farmed, but as generations get removed from farming, then it becomes, well, it wasn't for sale, but now maybe it is because the children don't farm anymore or whatever. So it's just really a really tough balance, and I wished I had an answer for you on that, but I don't.
Has there ever been an instance where it was turned down? A development was declined?
I struggle to think of one. I'll just be honest. Again, we're a pro-growth community. We have a huge housing need, and probably before the tornado, I would say we were in a housing crunch. After the tornado, we're probably on the edge of a housing crisis. But what form do those developments come in also matter. The density, which is also super controversial, then the more dense you build, the more houses you can get on a smaller amount of land, which then doesn't eat up the rest of the land as fast. But now we're growing really fast, so it's just really tough. And I know, especially with the major announcement in Elizabethtown, and then I know Nashville expanded area has dealt with this for years now, and it's getting more difficult to address.
Is there any plans for the sewer to go in alternative directions versus south of the county?
So, not that I'm aware of. I would say what they have expanded to now is the only corridors that I'm aware of that the major expansions have happened now. What we've gotten into is where land's so high, housing costs are so high, it's become more lucrative for the developer then to extend sewer on their own at their expense. So some of that's happening. Most of the major infrastructure that I'm aware of now that is going to be done or needs to be done on the sewer side is focused more up towards, more up Louisville Road, more towards, Smiths Grove in that area. So we are starting to see some, I guess, development up, I guess, in the northern parts of county. That's one of my pet peeves when I moved back here was we built all of our housing in the south and built our major job in the north. So, and then we wonder why our transportation is so clogged up. But nevertheless, that's what it is. So we're starting to see more development up north, but typically it's still focused heavily in the south part of the county. So long answer to probably say, not that I'm aware of, but it needs to, the love needs to be spread a little more than what it is probably. Any more questions or comments on that piece? Thank you. Should have had that one. Endeavor to advance the academic achievement, skills, enhancement, and competency of the workforce. And for this one, we talked to John Swords, who's our Southern Kentucky Workforce Development Board person. And, talent and skill development, this is where this comes back into play. Trying to match employers' needs with that talent available. Part of that is academics, just, kind of retraining, re-educating workforce for new types of jobs. But a big part of that is skills-based too, just new skills, learning new skills, that type of thing. So some of our workforce challenges have really increased, and this is nationwide, but I think certainly here too. Workforce challenges are a bit of a mystery. I don't really understand them. We've got some people with some insights, but I don't know anybody that's got a real handle on why 24% of Kentuckians who are able to work are not working right now. Our labor force participation rate is pretty bad. So we've lost 24% of our workforce for various reasons. And so, is this the new normal? That's kind of the question. And I think part of that answer is yes, maybe. It seems to be one part of attitude towards work. We don't value careers like we used to, or places we work. The loyalty factor, if you will, is not quite there the way it used to be. I think one of the things John mentioned is government benefits compete with kind of some of those jobs, especially on the lower end of the pay scale, that the government needed to work on revise how some of those benefits are doled out. And then employers need to start rethinking employee benefits and what those mean. It's not, maybe not enough now to just simply offer minimal health care or whatever. And it's not big ticket items, but daycare, for example, has gotten so expensive. You look at $8,000–$10,000 per kid for daycare now. It's a pretty big expense to ask employees to do that, especially if you have more than one child. Other things, education reimbursement, average college debt for a graduate now is $34,000, $36,000 per graduate. Not Western necessarily, but that's a nationwide statistic. So trying to rethink how some of those items are just thought about, and how employers might be able to help address that. The other piece is automation of the workforce, specifically in robots replacing jobs, and artificial intelligence replacing certain jobs too. So the need to retrain and reskill the workforce to those types of jobs, trying to identify what skills those are, I think is a huge challenge, and trying to get our workforce retrained for those types of jobs. I think I'll stop there. Is anybody got any questions or thoughts on that? Take practical steps to maintain and improve the quality of life in Warren County in support of economic development objectives. So for this session, we talked to Jeff Reed, who is the big long title, big long organization. I'll just say the director of SkyPack. And then Sherry Murphy, who is the Bowling Green Area Convention and Visitors Bureau head person. So I think one thing that we all have to keep in mind is the amenities, so what's offered in your community, arts and tourist attractions is what makes communities unique. So what's kind of what defines your community. Of course, it's the people, but it's the things they are to do. So Corvettes, caves, any number of things. So these are business and workforce recruiting and talent attraction tools. So Christian could probably speak to this more, but I think that's one thing at some point when they're coming down to making a decision, probably a secondary or maybe a third level factor is what does the community have to support their, not only the executives making the decision, but their workforce. What do they have to do in those communities? The other thing is that daytime population increases, the more, I guess, viable tourist attractions and arts venues, those types of things brings in outside dollars, but also obviously has local dollar implications too, which then creates even more jobs. So tourism, pre-COVID and rapidly coming back, was the third largest industry in Kentucky. Tourism is, so it's a huge industry. So daytime populations in Bowling Green, the city, pretty much double during the day. So it's not just us driving around honking horns and yelling at each other. It's 75,000 more people on top of that. So our population roughly doubles during the day, and that's one, because we have a lot of workers coming in during the week to work, but then weekends and during the week, we also have a lot of tourists in our community. So it's a big industry. So since COVID, outdoor activities has seen a significant increase, and we're well positioned to take advantage of that with caves and cars. So we've got a lot of different attractions for car enthusiasts, but also outdoors with Mammoth Cave nearby, Lost River, and we're looking at expanding our greenways systems, which is again kind of that amenity part. And then the city has put in a lot of effort, a lot of money for the riverfront, which has not even started yet, but it's coming soon. Riverfront improvements as well as downtown improvements, and city and county both have made lots of parks improvements that have made a huge difference, and again attracted even more to our community. Any questions? Okay. So 7 is kind of where we bring the utilities back into the equation again. So make the most efficient use of infrastructure and public resources. Again, kind of build where the utilities are. So water is kind of well positioned to serve into the future with the treatment plant expansion that I believe will be finished this year and come online. That will provide plenty of capacity into the future. And that's a big project, so that one's funded by the ratepayers as a whole. But when we have the smaller subdivision projects or the commercial projects, generally the developers pay for needed infrastructure improvements that are required to serve their projects. So again, development where the infrastructure already exists is the best efficiency since that investment's already been made, and it makes it more affordable and hopefully keeps our housing costs from rising even more rapidly than they already are. We'll talk about housing in a later element, later chapter, but housing prices last year, housing values, home values went up 10% last year and 8% the year before. So 18%. Great if you already own a home, makes it more difficult if you're looking for one. So we do have some infrastructure funding constraints for large projects. We're kind of, if there's such a thing as low-hanging fruit for infrastructure improvements, we've kind of spent all of that money and done most of those things, existing or planned. As we get larger and larger industries and businesses looking to our community to build and expand, they are high utility users. So we're on the edge of facing some pretty significant infrastructure improvements that the community is going to have to make some decisions on. Broadband, we kind of already talked about. We talked about the expansion. And then one of the things that Mark Iverson mentioned was downtown. And he was talking downtown as a larger area than the square or Circus Square. But it says down at the core of the community does not need to hollow out or decay. We need a strong core with redevelopment where infrastructure already exists and maybe more dense. So that would be essentially taking older parts of the city and then redeveloping them rather than maybe going out to our greenfield areas where we just consume more land. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a little cheaper to do that, but that shouldn't be the only consideration necessarily. But nevertheless, that's typically what has been favored to a point. At some point, I think it will, as the markets and land prices and everything continues to go up, hopefully the redeveloping the inner parts of our city will become more a viable option. Any questions on this objective?
Yes, I'm a little concerned, but with all the growth and expansion, and this is for the next 30 years, is that right? Is
So-
that kind of the plan?
To 2030. So there's
Okay.
just about 10, so we're kind of halftime. So this was adopted in 2012, 2010, 2012, goes to 2030. So this is halftime. So this would be for the next 10 years.
And growth is great, but is there a point where we get too big and it's too much?
Well,
I don't know.
I don't either. Basically, our charge is to try to guide and manage that growth the best we can. Liken it to a kind of the snowball effect. We've packed the snow, we've pushed it up the hill, now the snowball's rolling. We're trying not to get run over now. It's kind of a world of haves and have-nots. If you go 2 counties either way of I-65, there's not much going on, and we're right in the middle of I-65. So is there too much? That would be a bigger question than not one for me to answer, but it would have to be the be the community. But I'll just say that we double in population every 25 years, 20 to 25 years. I don't see that slowing down, even if we wanted to at this point. Something big would have to change. We're, again, very successful in economic development. The levels of activity in our office, we had a little lull and we thought we were going to get to breathe, but this past month it's just skyrocketed again. I think we've probably had as many applications come through our office or start to come through our office as we've ever had. So typically we beat those projections, and you know, by 2045 we're going to have 200,000 people in the county. So I don't necessarily think it'll be slowing down. But how that's accomplished or how that's done, we'll have to continue to do our best to address all the different issues. Sometimes it's good problems to have, but it doesn't mean they're not challenges either. Yes?
You were starting to talk about the downtown area, and I was wondering about the tools that you're using for that infill downtown in terms of incentives. Is tax increment financing to districts on the table to expand or create tax abatements, payment of the tax programs,
Yes.
things like that?
Yeah. So currently, we do have a tax increment TIF district in downtown. It covers just certain blocks, and it's weird boundaries. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's what kind of started with the ballpark, and there's plenty of, and it expands from there. It's been expanded once or twice since that was started. So that is in place. Again, it only covers certain blocks. So that is available. There's also Opportunity Zone that covers part of downtown. It's kind of the closer to the river part, so that is definitely an option available as well. And then the city's discussing some project-based incentives for certain things too, but I don't think there's any details or commitments beyond just discussion at that point. So
So those things specific are not detailed in the growth plan?
not in this not in our comp plan. This is more the 10,000 foot level. If you want to know more about that, I would suggest you talk to Brent Childers, Neighborhood Community Services, and he can kind of tell you about all of those different things. There is some potential incentives as well through CDBG programs and that type of programs as well. Let's see. So 8, support the expansion of economic opportunities to disadvantaged persons to geographic areas that have historically underperformed economically. And that's some of that incentives we were just talking about. But some Brent Childers and Leda Beckers, who we interviewed here. So basically, some of the comments that were said, reinvestment in older neighborhoods is imperative, and we're going to create better opportunities. In the west, kind of that west end and some of the downtown census tracts, we're investing in public infrastructure to make the areas more attractive for private reinvestment. So most of those monies have been going towards private reinvestment, but also some housing, sidewalks, roads, and parks as well. But we expect there'll be a lot of improvements. Hillary, do you remember what the general numbers are on just the downtown? 3 million, something like that?
I don't.
You know?
I know it's high, but I don't.
Yeah.
remember.
So I think the city's at least committed, although maybe not officially, at least 3 million just to start the improvements of the riverfront and create more active recreational parks down there. So that's one big thing. Housing is something we're going to continue to look at and create different housing opportunities. And then we're really looking at catalyst projects to spur that private reinvestment, private development. For example, I don't think it's any secret now, but Service One Credit Union is going to build down facing the riverfront on a piece of property that's been a dirt mound with silt fencing around it for, I think they finally removed the silt fence, but that's a good project. Opportunities for new Americans. City has increased their efforts to make connections, jobs of people, immigrants, new Americans who have moved to our community, connect them to jobs and increase our workforce numbers, and just making sure that it's known that jobs are available and that they are welcome to have those jobs. And then the other piece of it that's pretty exciting is creating entrepreneurship opportunities. Again, network connections. How do I open a restaurant, for example, or some other business, and trying to create those connections and help people get started. Some of the challenges, of course, is language. We have, I think, over 90 different languages spoken in Bowling Green now. 56 are very, very common. So just trying, the language barrier is a big deal, but we do have international community liaison at the city. We have the International Center, and trying to, again, connect people just to integrate them into our culture and our community as fast as possible, but then typically they all have jobs within 3 months of being in our community. Trying to keep our workforce local in that regard is something that was kind of unexpected, but is now identified. So a lot of our new Americans are traveling outside the community to work in other communities when we have hundreds of jobs here in Warren County that we can't fill. So trying to, again, connect people up to those jobs. And then, of course, with everything we seem to be doing now, it's keeping up with change and just being adaptable. And that was in the context of, the city never knows, it's out of their control. They have to be adaptable because global crises, wherever they may happen, we don't know. And then that group of people, wherever that crisis is the one that are sending people to our community. The most recent being the Afghan refugees or new Americans that just came into Bowling Green. Is there any questions on number 8? Just got 2 more. So 9, strengthen the position of downtown Bowling Green as a community focus of economic activity. So continuing investment in downtown. I'm sure you've seen the streetscape improvements, street trees, new sidewalks, better painted crosswalks, making the downtown more walkable. Trying to figure out the best way to tie everything together from the top of the hill, so what WKU campus down to the river, and then of course in between medical center, ballpark, all of those different areas. So trying to tie all that together. And those are the types of amenities that the workforce attractants, the talent attraction that they want to, I guess we're getting old. I'm getting old. So when I was getting out of college or trying to find a job, typically you would find a job and then you'd move that to that town and find a place to live. The new younger generations go to a place that they want to live and that has the things that they want to do, and then they move there and then find a job. So it's a completely different paradigm than it used to be. So that's where the amenities come in, being more walkable, having the tourism attractions, the arts attractions, and those types of things, that's how you attract the talent. So in addition to the dollars the city is spending on, I guess, the downtown infrastructure, the hardscape, they've also recently hired a downtown development coordinator, and that's staffed to build upon the foundations of the residential, commercial, arts and entertainment that we already have down, trying to coordinate and collaborate and create more synergies between those and create those additional amenities that make it a better place to live, work, and play. Again, coordination and cooperation of local tourist attractions, stakeholders, and events through promotion and marketing. How do we leverage the people that are here for Corvette Homecoming? How do we get those downtown to support, those people downtown to support some of the businesses, farmers markets, those types of things? And then from a planning standpoint, I think one of the things that is another challenge is adapting to changing land use mixes. So everybody's pretty familiar with, I call it retail roulette, Amazon effect, take your pick, what you want to do. So we no longer go out and go shopping like we used to. Instead, we get online, buy things, and then expect it to deliver to us instead. So the retail space, the retail demand is not there like it used to be. That was getting replaced, those empty spaces were getting replaced by offices. Well, now that COVID has hit and sent everybody home, I think a lot of us have figured out there are some things that we can do at home from home offices. So office space demand is still strong, but not like it used to be. I think smaller spaces, again, collaborative spaces. So I think there's challenges in what we do. What can we do with some of these? Whereas, for example, downtown, we expect to maybe have the whole first floor be retail, and then maybe residential above. We're starting to have to rethink some of those mixes. Maybe that needs to be more residential because, one, we need housing, but then two, the demand for retail office is not as strong as it used to be. So trying to keep an eye on those trends and figure out what that mix needs to be for our community. Is there any questions on this one? All right. Last one, coordinate efforts and share informational resources among various entities involved in economic development. So here, interagency cooperation is our biggest advantage. When we have a business come to town, it's the same team of people that see that business from start to finish. Hardly a week goes by that we don't talk to the chamber don't talk to us, utilities, all the various government agencies. So, you know, we do economic development very well, and I think that is why. That's the biggest piece of that. Kind of don't want to underemphasize it, I guess, don't want to really overemphasize it either, but talent and workforce is really our biggest challenge right now. We probably not supposed to say this, but we have lost in industries that we probably would have gotten if we would have had the workforce available to do that, and that's a somewhat recent phenomenon. So that talent workforce is a huge commitment. It's one that community is taking seriously and trying to figure that out. The other thing that's a piece of that is just kind of aging out of the workforce. You had your biggest group of population used to be your baby boomers, and they're kind of all retired now, the Great Resignation, so that's a part of that. And your newest talent supply, your newest workforce is your Gen Xers. So they're trying to figure out that mix is just a tough thing. So I think that's going to be going to be our biggest challenge. So other than that, the land use mixes, that balance, which we talked some about tonight, I think is going to continue to be tough for years to come. We're trying to reach out more to partners like at the Ag Extension Office and others to do a better job of having those conversations and seeing what we can do together as a community. So other than that, that's all I have. Again, I'll be happy to take any questions. It doesn't have to be just on these items, but if you have a question in general, be happy to try to answer it. Other than that, I won't keep you here all night either. So, yeah.
What are the next steps in the comprehensive plan, years out?
Yeah, so the next steps, I should ask, I think I got a slide for that. The next steps will continue reviewing the rest of the elements. I think we have 6 or 8 elements, and this is number 2 that we've looked at. So we're going to go through the rest of those elements and review those. The next one is natural and cultural resources. Then if you go to our website, you'll kind of see all of those. You scroll down, there's a whole timeline, a tentative timeline. We're kind of taking it month by month. And so we're going to review the rest of those elements. I think we've got 4 or 5 more, I can't remember for sure. And then we've got to go visit our smaller cities, smaller communities, and have some discussions with them. Primarily Smiths Grove. Smiths Grove is experiencing a lot of change and needs to have some conversations there, many of which we kind of mentioned tonight. And then we have some focal point plans, so smaller area plans that we just need to at least look at. And we expect all of that really to take the rest of this calendar year. Hopefully by the end of the year, ideally November, we would have a public hearing that would then adopt the changes. We're not expecting any major changes to our goals and objectives. We are expecting our text to change somewhat, and I would suspect our future land use map will probably have some amendments. The rest, I don't know that we'll have too much. So probably be taking the rest of this year. The tornado threw a little wrench in things. We're starting to, our part of that's really starting to ramp up, so it's making time a bit difficult, but we're going to try our best to stay on that schedule and get that. Our 5-year update is what this is, essentially, our second 5-year update. We're going to try to stay on that schedule and get that done by late fall, early winter.
And Ben, you talked about, the fractured communication landscape that you guys struggle with. Do you think that's the major issue for, obviously turnout, apathy, those challenges? How do you guys feel like you can address those in the coming years?
I don't know. This is one effort, just to be honest. For this effort, this is my latest attempt to, reach out as much as we can. We're going to specific agencies, doing all of these interviews to really stakeholders, community stakeholders, which will hopefully generate more conversation. So that's one thing, is that networking, if you will, peer agencies or sister agencies. So we do that. We do have Facebook and Twitter, which I know is not the only media social media out there, but I can't do 50.
Yeah.
So we just do the 2 biggest ones. That's something we started recently. So we try to do that. Email. So we have the constant contact list. So we do the emails that we send out as well, all of our notices. So why are we doing this video? Why are we recording this? again, put it on YouTube and try, so people who couldn't be in person, which there's people who want to be in person and people who don't.
Right.
And so we're trying that too. So we're trying, I guess, a hybrid, a multitude of different things to reach out and at least have the information out there. But to just be frank and short, I don't know.
Right.
None of my peers across the state know. Public hearings, public meetings have dwindled in numbers every year. And I'm not, there's a number of reasons. Some of it is, blame on our parts, I would guess. We've earned that. I think there's a lot of apathy towards government in general right now. And it starts at federal and has trickled down to local and become more prevalent. These are just my opinions.
Yeah.
But I don't have an answer. I don't know. And so that's why we've tried to do newspaper articles and talk as much as we can and reach out as much as we can. And if you got an answer,
No, I
I'm
don't.
happy to
I was-
listen.
No, I don't. I just was curious. I know you guys are a lightning rod for hot button issues, and, the room is full when people are angry, but,
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah, it's always difficult whenever you have that situation where it's a specific project at that point, which all gets decided upon based on all of these goals and objectives.
Right.
Staff presents an analysis, the applicants, of course, have their application, and then the public shows up and gives their testimony, and then the decision makers have to make a decision based on those three items, and it becomes a hot button issue but again, it's like that in many other communities too. I don't have an answer though.
I know you guys get the brunt of a lot of difficult decisions, but I guess my concern is, just like you couldn't recall off the top of your head, like a development that had been turned down, and I know that a lot of decision-making goes into it, and it's probably not a simple decision, but you call it a balancing act, but it's not balanced. at all.
So you hit it on the nail on the head, and I'll see what kind of feedback I get. But you brought it up. I'll comment on it. So here's the way planning and zoning works. The planning commissioners, there are 12. They are my and our staff's direct bosses. They hire and fire us. They do all the stuff you see on TV, but they also have oversight of our office. Those 12 are appointed by the elected officials. So the mayor of Bowling Green appoints 4, the judge, county judge appoints 4, and then 1 each from Palm Springs, Oakland, Woodburn, and Smiths Grove. So that makes the 12. So we are the messenger in a lot of instances. We do the staff reports, and we try to help the public as much as we help the applicants. Sometimes I know that's difficult to understand. But ultimately, the decision makers are the planning commissioners, make a recommendation, and it's a yes or no vote, but it's in the form of a recommendation to the legislative bodies. And then that legislative body is the one that has the final say-so. So if you feel like it's unbalanced and you feel like that certain voices aren't being represented, then your elected officials are the ones who appoint the planning commissioners. And so that's as plain as I know how to say it. I have no control over who they appoint, and I try to get along with everybody, and I do, I hope, for the most part. But that's the answer.
Does every recommendation from the planning commission then go to our magistrates and judges? All decisions go that process?
Yeah, so for zone changes, we can get into it, but I'll just say zone changes because that's typically what we're talking about. So zone changes cannot be done unless it's passed in the form of an ordinance. So the legislative body is the one that has to pass it. Now, what happens 95 to 98% of the time, they will take what the Planning Commission's recommendation was. Because the Planning Commission's job is to create that public record, have that quasi-judicial hearing in that setting. So public testimony, all of that's taken, and we do forward that all to the city, the cities of the county, and they have that record before them. So all of that testimony, the minutes, the video, which we just post on YouTube now, we send them the links, all of that is forwarded to those legislative bodies.
And when a decision of the zoning change is brought to the planning and zoning, what information do the commissioners get to make the decision that they make?
So the way it works in general, and Rachel, feel free to jump in here, but the way it works is, so we have a pre-application meeting with them approximately 30 days, could be longer, but 30 days before the hearing date. We sit in that meeting and we discuss with the applicant all of the items that would apply from the comprehensive plan, any of the items that we think would be pertinent, and we give advice sometimes. Sometimes we're not allowed to, or we don't. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. And we just go over the application process and all of that. And so when we do that, we have our pre-application notes. And if you look at our staff reports, that's typically the stuff at the very back. So we may discuss some stuff in that meeting that we took a note on that they may not end up in the development, but we just kind of note what we went over and what was discussed. Then usually before they submit, they'll at least have one or two more conversations with us, but not always. And then they'll submit the actual application. Now, until they submit that official application, nothing else is public yet at that point. Once they do, everything is public. So so what do the planning commissioners get? Well, and then after that, approximately a week or two, and a couple weeks after they submit, we actually review that application, analyze it, and then our staff will send notes back to them saying, we discussed this, you didn't include that, would you consider including this, preserve trees, whatever, and then they'll respond or change, maybe, because it's their application. But whatever that correspondence is, all is included to the planning commissioners. So they have notes from our first meeting, they have correspondence from in between meetings, and then they have of course, their application that they submit. And then likewise, once we advertise and do all of that, if we get letters, we get emails, typically it's best to show up at the meeting. But if we get stuff like that, we'll include that if we get it in time to mail it. If not, we'll put it at their desk the day of the meeting. So they get everything. We've tried our best to create it as wide open and as transparent as possible. Yep.
Another question, the relationship of specific zoning request changes in relation to the growth map in the comprehensive plan. So there's the area growth map in the comprehensive plan. What legal authority does that have? In other words, can a zoning request change, would it even be considered if it violates what's in that area growth map?
So let me pick through that and pick different terminology.
Sure.
So does anything ever get approved that is not maybe congruent with the map itself at the time it was applied for? And yes, all the time. Very, very routinely it does. So our comprehensive plan here is unique in the fact that it allows for those future land use map changes to be part of an application. So while it is a guide for growth, it is not the final word. So it's not a zoning map. It is not a zoning map. It is a development guide. So the way the analysis works is Step one, we have kind of a four-part review. So step one, the review is it compliant with the map? And if the answer is no, they have an opportunity to make an application to change that future land use map. So I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. Then step two is we do a site compatibility review. So we just look at everything generally within a quarter of a mile. What's the general building characteristics, site layouts, that type of stuff. Civil and architectural, essentially, in urban design. We look at that, that's steps 2 and 3, and then step 4, just if we have a special planning area, that's step 4, so sometimes that's not included. So that's the basic. So we do have some resources on our comp plan update website that one's a more brief summary that we did in cooperation for Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, I think is the group that we were able to summarize, create a good summary of the zone change process and what goes on into it. And then if you really get bored and want to fall asleep, we've got a huge book we call our Planning Commission Handbook, and that's really our orientation that we give our planning commissioners, and that's all available, but it'll go in a whole lot of detail. But short answer to that question is yes, you typically when we have all the time, I guess, when we have a future land use map amendment proposed with a zone change, they vote on that future land use map first, and then if that's approved, then they can act on the zone change. Any other questions?
I just have,
Go for it.
while we were sitting here,
Why don't you use the microphone?
I'm Rachel Hurt. I work at the Planning Commission. And I actually thought of 2 applications while we were sitting here that were denied. And one was on Dillard Road for, I forget how many lots. It was a residential subdivision. And then there was another one recently off of Plum Springs Road in the north part of the county that was recommended for denial through the Planning Commission. And I guess as far as I know, the comment was made that the voices aren't being heard from both sides. I think the reason we've had so many applications that have been approved speak to the comprehensive plan that we currently have. Like Ben said, we're just kind of a liaison between anyone who would like to make an application or anyone in the public up until the public hearing takes place with the Planning Commission. And so our job as staff is to administer our comprehensive plan, which includes the future land use map, which has been adopted by all of the legislative bodies in Warren County. And so when we do our staff analysis, when we're drafting a staff report, we look at the future land use map. And like Ben said, that's really kind of one step in the process. And then like tonight, we're going through the economic development chapter of the plan, but then there are also all of the other different elements: land use, transportation, community facilities, natural resources, housing and neighborhoods. And so we handpick all of the applicable items depending on the application that is made, and we evaluate whether or not the application complies with that particular item. And so when the Planning Commission makes a recommendation either to approve or deny an application, they are basing their decision partially off of the application and if it meets the criteria in the plan. And so I think that the reason we've had so many applications that have been approved are because the Planning Commission ultimately found that those items conformed to the plan or met the specific goals or objectives that were applicable to that specific development. And so,
But that doesn't necessarily mean that there were other items they didn't necessarily comply with.
right, and so of the 12 commissioners that are sitting at the public hearing, depending on who shows up, they all come from different backgrounds. with different perspectives, and they may all have a difference of opinion, just on one specific goal. One that comes up at every meeting is whether or not this request is compatible with the surrounding area. Well, that could mean a myriad of different things, whether that be density, or if it's a residential development, are the home sizes comparable, are the materials comparable, character and pattern of development as far as things like building orientation or location of parking. And so all of those commissioners, they may not have the same opinion of what compatibility means. And in the cases where we had applications that were denied, in those situations, they felt that those applications were not compatible or that they didn't conform to the plan. And so I think, like Ben had said, we have pre-application meetings with applicants before they even file an application. And we offer suggestions based on the comprehensive plan, where an applicant may come in and maybe the future land use map is, I don't know.
Agriculture.
Yeah, agriculture. And they're like, well, we'd like to rezone this to industrial for a freight movement company or something. And we're like, well, our comprehensive plan would say that that is not appropriate in this area. And so sometimes we have those conversations and, we say, well, maybe you would reconsider this because this would conform to the map. And sometimes that is successful. Other times there are applications that are filed that are not in compliance with the plan, and we specifically tell the applicants that they are not in compliance with the plan or the future land use map. But ultimately, it's not our decision. So, I don't know. I was just trying to provide some perspective on kind of past situations. So, that's all I got.
Any other questions? All right, I guess we're done. Thank you all for coming.